Well, thanks, Andash. And this has been a fantastic day, a day that's right up my street. You know, it's been billed as the headline of hope, but of course we've carried with it everything else that goes with a successful project. You know, the ambition and commitment and technical brilliance and incredible successes. So we've celebrated that today in a brilliant way. This has really been quite something. So now to sort of focus our minds on why we have reasons to hope, we've got 5 representatives with their projects. There's not many out of all the projects we have. We've managed to narrow it down to 5. So we've got a conservation educator, and there's nothing more vital at the moment. Boy, do we need conservation educator. We've got someone from the very front line of that conflict that exists between wildlife and humanity. We've got the future of food security, which we all know it's always been an issue, and now it's become an absolute urgent crisis. And we've even got something called hoofless meat and finless fish, which, when I say that, sounds a lot like the perfect name for a rock and roll band. I mean, if I was walking past the Lucky Bar this evening and it said tonight, it's hoofless meat and the finless fish, I'd be straight in there. Who could resist it? But it isn't. 2 very separate cell-based food products. Very, very exciting business. So we're going to get going. I'm going to introduce Carmen. Carmen Chavez. She's a tropical biologist, National Geographic Explorer. So come on out, Carmen. Have fun. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I come from a part of the world that is not only beautiful and rich. As we all know, the Amazon rainforest, it's home for many thousands of plant species, animals, and everything else that is awaiting to be discovered. Also, it's home to many indigenous cultures and people and groups. But what is a little bit not understood so well sometimes is that there's millions of people that are not originally from this area, and they are settled there. In the case of the Amazon region of Madre de Dios in Peru, for example, most of the people have arrived from the Andes. They have immigrated in the search of opportunities and looking a better future for their families. Some are there for decades, cutting down the forest. And in the most recent years, many are just coming lured by the gold that is found in the rivers and in the sediments. 20 years ago, I was very lucky to go to the Manu River. I was surrounded by many scientists, environmentalists, and researchers that taught me so much about the forest. And I learned to appreciate this place and to love it. And I made my mission in life to help protect this environment. Along with the Amazon Center for Environmental Education and Research, an organization known as the ACER Foundation, we have been working tirelessly to educate the people that are actually living in this area already. We provide with opportunities that they can learn to appreciate this area from the inside out. We meet with hundreds of school children and thousands of people in the Amazon, in the Madre de Dios region. I want to introduce you to Gloria Carrasco, the woman who is carefully examining these leaves. I was teaching a course in botany and restoration, and she came from the Andes to the Amazon 25 years before. And she's a dedicated teacher, and when we were walking in a trail, I pointed out to this tree that it's an important element in the area, the Shiringa tree, the rubber tree. I didn't know what it meant for Gloria, but she just jumped out of the trail, ran to hug this tree, and tears were coming down from her eyes. I didn't know that in her 25 years living in the Amazon, she never had the opportunity to see this tree. She knew about the importance of this species. She knew that this species changed the way we live currently in the modern times. Now, she's teaching her own students about this place. I'm taking her class to see this very same tree. Thanks to the support of the National Geographic, we are reaching even more people. And we believe that we are going to be able to save this place from the inside out. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much, Carmen. And this is it, conservation education. Yeah, this gives us hope. Thank you very much. Now it gives me great pleasure to introduce Eric. Eric Schulze is the Vice President of Product and Regulation of Memphis Meats. And I made the joke about hoofless meat. So, Eric, you're not in a rock band, are you? No, okay, well, come out anyway. Have some fun. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Memphis Meats makes real animal meat directly from real animal cells in a process we call cell-based meat production. From a single rice grain-sized biopsy, we can produce an entire cow's worth of meat in the same time it takes to produce a cow, roughly 2 to 3 years. In a facility the size of a brewery, we expect to produce our meat using less inputs, producing less waste, and using no antibiotics whatsoever. So I'm going to do a quick straw poll. There's cell-based meat on here, and there's conventional chicken. Both are raw. With a quick show of hands, who thinks the one on the left-hand side of your screen is cell-based? One on the right? If you guessed the one on the left, you'd be incorrect. The one on the right is cell-based chicken. It's a question I get asked the most. What does your product look like? Well, it looks like real meat because it is real meat made from the same things that meat is made from. Now, on the left-hand side of your screen, you have the cell-based meatball we debuted in 2016 and the world's first cell-based chicken in 2017. And I can personally attest these products are delicious. I get to eat them every day. It's my favorite part of my job. So you might ask yourself, we want to share them with the world, so why do we even bother producing cell-based meat in this, and poultry and seafood in this way? Well, simply because at Memphis Meats, we hope for a world of and, not ors. Too often, progress is pitted as a false choice against tradition versus innovation, past versus future. But if you look at the history of civilization, all innovations start as an earnest attempt to preserve our most cherished human traditions. And at the center of that is food and food innovation. And as we move forward to build ourselves into a sustainable planetal species, and hopefully a sustainable interplanetary species, food must remain at the center of that innovation. And we're facing an innovative challenge right now. You see, by 2050, the world's population is expected to hit 10 billion people, a little less than 3 billion more than today. Meat demand is expected to double in that time. In order to meet that demand, we're going to have to produce a staggeringly large 140 billion animals and use most of the arable land to grow the plants, to feed the animals, to feed us. So humanity has an interesting challenge facing it. Now, on the surface of it, it feels like an us versus them choice, but it doesn't have to be. You see, we don't have to either choose eating meat or having a sustainable planet. No, we can have our meat and eat it too. You see, it's going to take innovation in all sectors, from conventional animal farming, small-scale sustainable farming, and cell-based methods, all putting innovation together to feed a growing world. If we're going to feed billions safe and delicious food, we'll have to work with more creativity, purposeful hope, and more technical discipline. And in doing so, feeding the world will allow us to have that safe and affordable food, and do it in a way that preserves our most cherished human traditions and allows us to build a safe and sustainable planet. And at Memphis Meats, we hope and believe we're building that world now. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Eric. True, this is a revolution, feeding us by revolution, where you can't go wrong. And if you think about a rock band, just get in there. It gives me great pleasure now to introduce Laly. Laly Lichtenfeld is a conservationist National Geographic Explorer, and she works at that incredibly dangerous and challenging front line that exists, which is the conflict between humans and wildlife. Come on, Laly, have fun.
Meet Lala, a magnificent young lion in northern Tanzania. He's banded together with 2 of his brothers to dominate a territory just outside of Tarangire National Park, a land that is also ruled by the Maasai people. Lala might not be alive today if not for the story I'm about to tell you. Now, Lala means sleep, and I often think of him lying around dreaming of becoming this beautiful boy. Just a wee bit of mean envy, perhaps. But Lala is a wonderful lion, and he's living in an area where there are a lot of people, and we've got to keep him safe. And I remember a day when lions like this would roar nightly around our home in the bush. And then I remember a time when it all went silent. And lions were being killed rapidly for human-lion conflict, for killing livestock. And as a result, we were losing the lion. And it was an age-old conflict. People were trading in their spears for poison and guns, New Age weapons. But there was a sense among the people that something wasn't right, even among themselves. And so we sat together and we decided under a tree to innovate together. Co-creation, that's at the foundation of our work at African People and Wildlife. The result was living walls, environmentally friendly, predator-proof corrals that were co-designed with the Maasai people. They keep lions safe from livestock, lions safe from people, and livestock safe from lions. And as a result, we've been able to reduce the killing dramatically. Living walls are a mighty icon of the power of community engagement, of the importance of linking traditional knowledge with modern-day science. It's incredibly important to recognize the strength that happens when we come together for a local and balanced solution to the challenges our planet faces. When we have a living wall, we have something that is with the community. It's done together in partnership. And it's been a catalyst in our work for a model of how we build community engagement, a global movement for community-driven conservation where rural people really are at the helm of the work that's being done. This is Rafael Syria. He says that living walls have transformed his life. From his own calculation, he used to lose 25% almost of his livestock to wild carnivores. And his family were exhausted because they were protecting the livestock at night. They weren't sleeping. The area around their corral was denuded as they constantly went out to fortify the corrals. And he says that both the physical and the financial investment that he's made in living walls has made a huge difference because now his livestock is safe, and now his family can rest at night, and the habitat is coming back. And this powerful innovation that came working with local communities, it benefits men and, I'm very proud to say, also women, because the women are often responsible for fortifying the corrals. And they say that living walls save them time. And also with the livestock safe, that keeps the women from being blamed when an animal is killed or even potentially persecuted. So they're more proud and they have more peace in their lives. So what does this mean? This is a reprieve for lions. The roar of the lions has finally come back to this landscape. We are seeing signs of lion recovery. And this is Lala's brother, just recently seen consorting with this lioness just only 2 weeks ago. And so very soon, the next generation will be trotting out on this landscape in a world where true partnerships and long-term partnerships with local communities make it possible to actually find the balance. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much, Laly. I can't imagine, it's a sense of working in such a challenging condition, seeing it through that perspective where success is measured by hearing the roar of the lions. You can't go wrong. Now it gives me great pleasure to introduce Brian. Brian is from Finless Fish. And it's not a rock band, is it, Brian? Just to make sure. No. And Brian Wyrwas is the co-founder and chief scientific officer of Finless Foods. So come on, Brian, have some fun out here. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Fish meat is some of the healthiest protein a person can consume. High amounts of omega-3, omega-6, whether it's breakfast, lunch, or dinner, you know it's going to be a healthy meal. But that has been changing. The world's ocean is getting more and more polluted. And unfortunately, these pollutants are entering the fish's body and affecting our health. So mercury accumulation is something of a well-known fact, but unfortunately, this isn't a natural phenomena. Essentially, I'm sorry. This is because we, as a species, introduced mercury into the ocean's ecosystem all those years ago. So we're affecting the health of the fish as a species. We're also affecting the ocean's ecosystem. So essentially, as we have more and more of these pollutants there and taking out tons and tons of fish from the sea, we are disrupting the delicate balance that we see in the ocean. And just to add to this very, very depressing list of things, overfishing is also a social issue. Somali pirates, before they were pirates, were actually fishermen. International fishing fleets came into their waters and took all the fish out of their sea. So with hungry mouths to feed, they resorted to violence. Now, despite all of this, the consumption of seafood is going nowhere but up. Essentially, we have a flat line on how much seafood we get out of the ocean's ecosystem, and that's because we can't pump out any more efficiency. So what comes in for the rescue? Aquaculture. Aquaculture does have also its slew of problems. So a lot of the feed that is introduced for aquaculture comes from the ocean, so you're not really circumventing a lot of those issues. As well as the systems of inputs and outputs, it's not really efficient. We're spending resources on feed that turns into skin, bone, muscle, and blood and other things. Wouldn't it be amazing if we could change 100% of this resource into 100% the product? At Finless Foods, we do exactly that. We take a high quality fish stock, we isolate the cells that are responsible for meat production, mainly muscle, fat, and connective tissue, and we grow that out in huge quantities, and then blend these three elements together to create a structured product for people to enjoy, a fish fillet. I'm very happy to say that we succeeded in our project. We grew fish protein outside the body of the fish for human consumption for the first time on September 8th of 2017. And those cells were actually part of that project. And what we're doing right now is scaling up our process so we could change the way we eat seafood forever. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Brian. And I love it. I spend my life working at sea to help create large marine protected areas to save the ocean, and Brian's work's going to do that. You're probably going to be a billionaire very soon, Brian. Next up is Caleb from Future Food Systems. And, you know, we do see a lot in the press about food security for the future, but only in the last few months has it become an absolute crisis, and we need to act. And what are we going to do? Well, luckily, we've got people like Caleb. Caleb is director of the Open Agriculture Initiative, MIT, Media Lab, and the National Geographic Explorers. So come on, Caleb, finish it off for us. Thank you.
Oh, you proud audience dwellers. Hello to the courtyard that's warm. I'm Caleb. When I arrived here in 2015, I was like a super misfit. I was a lonely food explorer. And all of my friends that have become family now were talking about all the coolest things, like oceans. And they were like, oceans are the best. They were like, but algal blooms, they suck. And I was like, I know what causes algal blooms. It's agriculture. And they're like, habitat destruction is the worst. We're losing all these animals. We're doing all these projects. And I was like, I know what's taking the habitat. It's agriculture. The answer to almost all the things that the people care about in this room has a thread through the basic human endeavor of agriculture. So if we're going to talk about these issues seriously, we have to be very much invested as National Geographic and as explorers and as a community in the future of food. You just heard about growing fish in lab environments. If this was your first time, then you're like, ew, and crazy and awesome, and you're feeling a lot of emotions. I would say that we're at the beginning of a new agricultural revolution, and I just want to point that out because agricultural revolutions radically change human history. They are the bedrock of why we have societies to begin with. We stop chasing each other around. Why we have all the technologies that we have. And so we're at the beginning of this next one, and it's going to be about the most boring thing you can imagine. It's going to be about accounting. If you're going to do accounting for where things came from, what they're made of, you're going to need a machine. And so people often see what I'm about to tell you about on my work side, and they always see the apps. They're like, oh, you could grow this in that place, and oh, vertical farming, and it's very cute. They miss the machine underneath. So quickly I'll show you the machine, and then I'll show you some of the apps that make it real. First step in my process is called encode. I build boxes of all different sizes, and what they're really doing is turning atoms into bits. We've heard about this before. It was called the internet. It was this cool thing. So taking real things, making them digital so that we can understand them in the space of the 21st century. So that's encode. Decode becomes, now we have all this data, metabolomics data, gas chromatography data, image-based data, sensor-based data. We have oceans of data. But how do we start to decode it? How do we find advanced relationships? So this is where kind of machine learning and artificial intelligence enters the game. But then the next step, because all of that means nothing if the information doesn't create knowledge. So we encode, we decode, and then we recode. We have to work on bringing those things into the real world. So I'm going to leave the abstract now and go to the tangible. When I was here in 2015, I had a weird little box that grew plants. And I've been on this journey since, because when I went to school gardens, I was brokenhearted with Michelle Obama's Let's Move campaign and all of that, to find out that almost every school garden that opens closes within 3 years, despite having massive amounts of funding. So I thought, a climate in a classroom, that's what we need to build. And now I'm happy to say that we've actually launched a whole nonprofit that's been putting these things out into the world, maker kits for gathering data, doing coding, doing electronics, and doing climate science and doing plant science. It's called the Personal Food Computer. I have no time, so I'm going to keep going fast. It's gone around the world. I've held Nat Geo hackathons with kids making their own. These are people in Baltimore. I just randomly picked it out of our community. They're all over the place. The next one. So I build bigger boxes, and inside of these bigger boxes, I produce things like medicine. All medicine came from plants. Then we synthesized it, okay, I won't go off into that land, but let's just say you can use climate science to decode a plant's ability to express the chemistries that we're interested in. We call that flavor. It's also called medicine. It's also called nutrition. And so I study, how do you do that in these new advanced environments? But more than that, 80% of the world currently relies on plant-based medicine. Some of the medicines I work on are $1 million a kilo that you can grow in these containers that can now bring chemotherapy drugs to a lot of other places. The next thing that I do in my boxes that's important to tell you, I work on, what do I grow in a box that tells me where to grow in the world? How can I learn by experimenting with climates of the past, present, and future what I should plant in the face of adaptation? And I've made this reel with a Ferrero, one of my sponsors that makes Kinder and Nutella and a lot of other things you might like. I actually look for places in the world, I climate prospect them. I use their weather data, I reenact those climates inside of boxes, and I grow trees. And I see, if I was to bring a tree into that place, would it produce an amazing nut? But more importantly than that, how could we effectively use our climate data so that we see the world as a catalog of opportunity? A catalog of climate stresses that can be planted within, and then say, oh, but what would it cost the environment if I did that? What would it create in terms of human nutrition, in terms of positive benefit? And if it doesn't win, we don't go there. This is the world that's starting to come to life. So I'll close with this. We put all of this out open source. That's the mission of my lab at MIT and the mission of my nonprofit. When I was here on stage last, I showed this in 2015. To be truthful, it was like half dream, half reality. I was like, Steve Jobs moment, like, yeah, we're all over the place. Made a lot of promises. People don't usually come back to the stage and like keep promises, so I'm here. From that time, 2015 to today, these are individuals within our network in 65 countries, across cultural barriers, across language barriers, across skill level barriers, all the things that people told me were impossible. They were like, you'll never get these crazy, weird little machines in the hands of all these different people, and you're going to have to build all these huge organizations. And they were all wrong. And so as these people out there, makers, hackers, students, scientists, homebodies, doesn't matter, come online, and they're looking for that digital interface to their agricultural future, we're building it. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Caleb. So there you go. Technical genius and leadership is going to save us all from starving to death. And after a day like today and these last 5 presentations, I sort of like to dream just into the near future and just imagine with what's going on politically at the moment, if every time we came to vote for somebody, on the card or on the screen, it's at the top, it said whether or not they'd attended a National Geographic Explorers Festival. That would be great, because we'd instantly know their priorities and their goals and the things that meant something to them. And when it wasn't, there'd be a big flash up, big red card. Danger, danger, this person has not come. And that's the sort of future I see. And we have to reflect now how lucky we are, because we operate within National Geographic with all the sponsors. We've got sponsors and support, and we've got political influence, and we've got money, and we've got change makers, and we can do all that while we do all of our work. But if we imagine that all of that support was taken away and I know you're listening, so please don't take it away. But if it was all taken away, we would still do what we do. There's nothing can stop us, and the 5 you just saw, from doing what we do. It's in us. It's the way we live our life. It's a life well lived. We just unstoppable. We just can't help ourselves, and that's why we do this. And I'd just like to celebrate that at this moment. Thanks very much.